Hello, family, welcome to Timeless Tales. If this is your first time watching, please consider subscribing to reach out to more people who enjoy this type of stories, and if you are a returning subscriber, I really appreciate you. Your support means a lot to our community as we grow. Sit back as we dive into the full story. Thomas adjusted the collar of his expensive tailored suit and leaned back in his leather chair. The towering glass windows of his office offered a panoramic view of the bustling city below, but the sight failed to soothe his restless mind. Despite the luxury and power he had worked so hard to achieve, Thomas felt an emptiness he couldn't explain. His phone buzzed on the desk. He glanced at the screen and sighed. It was Isabella, his girlfriend. The messages she had sent over the past few hours were a string of angry complaints about everything she thought was wrong with their relationship. "We need to talk about this. You never listen to me. Do you even care anymore?" Thomas set the phone face down, rubbed his temples, and exhaled heavily. He wasn't in the mood for another argument, but avoiding it only made things worse. Their fights had escalated in the past months, and last night had been one of the worst yet. It shouldn't be this hard, he muttered to himself. By the time he reached his mansion later that evening, the air inside felt tense. Isabella was sitting in the living room, scrolling on her phone, but she didn't look up when he walked in. "Hey," he said hesitantly. "Hey," she replied, her tone clipped. "Look, I don't want to fight," he began, sitting on the edge of the couch. "Neither do I," Isabella cut him off, finally looking at him. Her expression was cold. "But what's the point of all of this? You're never really here, Thomas. You're always buried in work or in your head. It's like I don't even know you anymore." "Isabella, that's not fair. You know how much pressure I'm under." "Oh, don't give me that excuse again," she snapped, her voice rising. "You think money and gifts fix everything? You don't even try to understand me." Thomas felt his frustration boiling over. "And what about you? Do you even see how hard I'm trying? Do you think this life builds itself?" The argument escalated quickly, voices echoing through the vast but cold halls of the mansion. Finally, Isabella grabbed her coat and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Thomas sank back onto the couch, staring blankly at the ceiling. After an hour of brooding, he decided he needed fresh air. Without much thought, he grabbed his jacket and headed out the door. The streets were alive with the usual energy of the city. Thomas walked without a destination, hands shoved in his pockets, his mind spinning with thoughts about his crumbling relationship. He barely noticed and his wallet slipped from his pocket and landed silently on the sidewalk behind him. Olivia, who had been sitting on the curb a few feet away, noticed it immediately. Her sharp, streetwise eyes caught the movement, and she instinctively rose to her feet. She recognized the man. It was hard not to notice someone wearing clothes that probably cost more than her entire year's earnings. She hesitated, looking down at the sleek leather wallet. A thought flickered in her mind, maybe this was her lucky break. Her stomach growled, reminding her of the meal she hadn't had that day. But deep down, Olivia knew she couldn't bring herself to keep it. Sighing, she picked it up and jogged after the man. "Excuse me," she called, her voice firm but polite. "Hey, you dropped something." Thomas stopped and turned around, his face unreadable. His eyes narrowed as he saw Olivia approach, holding his wallet out to him. "I found this," she said simply, her voice cautious. For a second, Thomas blinked in surprise. But instead of gratitude, doubt crept into his expression. "And you didn't think to keep it?" he asked, his tone cold. Olivia's smile faltered. "No. I thought you'd need it." "Right," Thomas said, snatching the wallet from her hand. "People don't just return wallets in this city. What were you planning to take before you handed it back?" The accusation stung more than Olivia expected. "Take," she repeated, her voice trembling with disbelief. "I wasn't trying to steal it, I was trying to help." Thomas scoffed, flipping through the wallet. Everything was still there, of course, but his frustration and bitterness made it hard to back down. "I know how people like you operate," he muttered. "You just want an angle." "People like me?" Olivia repeated, her anger rising now. "You don't even know me." "And I don't want to," Thomas said curtly, turning to walk away. "Enjoy your wallet," Olivia shouted after him, tears brimming in her eyes. "Maybe it'll keep you warm at night." Thomas paused for a moment, guilt flashing across his face, but he shook it off and continued down the street. That night, Thomas returned home to find silence awaiting him. Isabella was nowhere to be found. Instead, a folded note rested on the counter. "We're done. I'm tired of feeling like this. Goodbye." The words felt like a punch to the chest. He sank into a chair, gripping the note tightly. As he replayed the day's events in his mind, his encounter with Olivia haunted him. The pain in her voice when he accused her, the way she had still handed him the wallet with kindness, it all nagged at his conscience. What had made him lash out at her? Was it his fight with Isabella? His own insecurities? The thought of leaving things unresolved with her gnawed at him. He didn't know why, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to find her again. The next day, Thomas walked the same streets he'd wandered the day before, searching for Olivia. He didn't even know her name, but he was determined to make things right. After hours of searching, he finally spotted her across the street, sitting by a coffee shop with a small tin cup beside her. She looked tired and worn but still carried an air of quiet resilience. Thomas approached cautiously, unsure of how to begin. "Excuse me," he said softly. Olivia looked up, her face hardening as she recognized him. "What do you want now?" "Another accusation?" "I deserve that," Thomas admitted, hands in his pockets. "I was wrong yesterday. I shouldn't have spoken to you like that." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "And why are you here now?" "To ease your guilt. Give yourself a pat on the back for being the bigger person." Thomas hesitated, realizing she had every reason to distrust him. "No," he said finally. "I came because you didn't deserve how I treated you. I'm sorry, and I want to make it right." "And how do you plan to do that?" Olivia asked, crossing her arms. Thomas reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope of cash. "Take this. It's not charity, it's an apology. Use it for food, a place to stay, whatever you need." Olivia stared at the envelope for a long moment. "You think throwing money at me makes this okay?" "No," Thomas said quietly. "But it's a start." After another pause, Olivia reluctantly took the envelope. She didn't thank him, but something in her guarded expression softened. "This doesn't make us friends," she warned. Thomas managed a faint smile. "I wouldn't expect it to." As he walked away, he couldn't help but feel that his encounter with Olivia was far from over. Something about her struck a chord deep within him, one that he didn't yet fully understand. A week passed since Thomas had seen Olivia on the streets, and despite her reluctance to forgive him, he couldn't get her out of his mind. Something about her lingered in his thoughts, the resilience in her voice, the way her eyes had hardened after his accusations but softened slightly when he'd apologized. Thomas stared at his reflection in the massive wall mirror of his bedroom, adjusting the crisp collar of his shirt. The mansion was quiet now, too quiet since Isabella left. The emptiness amplified his thoughts as he tried to prepare himself for the upcoming company ball party. It was a grand event where every employee was expected to attend with a partner. For a man like Thomas, finding a date would have been easy, women often swooned at his success. But deep down, he was tired of being seen as nothing more than a wallet or status symbol. The idea of bringing some shallow, artificial date disgusted him. As he sifted through his contacts for the umpteenth time, his mind wandered back to Olivia. "She'd probably laugh in my face if I asked her," he thought, smirking. But as ridiculous as the idea sounded, it wouldn't leave him alone. She was strikingly beautiful, and though she lacked the refinement most guests would have, he believed she could fit in with the right preparation. With that thought planted in his mind, Thomas made a decision. Grabbing his car keys, he headed out into the bustling city to find her once more. Olivia sat under the same lamppost where Thomas had first encountered her, clutching a lukewarm cup of coffee that she'd bought with part of the money he gave her. The envelope had been a lifeline, she'd used it to buy food and a few essentials. Still, she remained wary of his intentions, assuming the gift had strings attached. When she spotted Thomas's sleek black car pull up across the street, her first instinct was to leave. But before she could gather her things, he was already crossing the road toward her. "What do you want now?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Good morning to you too," Thomas replied with a small smile. "Can I sit?" "Why?" "Because I have a proposition for you," he said, ignoring her wary tone. Olivia scoffed but gestured for him to sit on the curb beside her. Seeing a man in a designer suit lower himself onto the dirty sidewalk amused her. "This better be good," she muttered. Thomas sighed, folding his hands. "My company is hosting a bow party. It's a fancy event where everyone brings a partner." "And you think of me?" Olivia said, raising an eyebrow. "That's rich." "I'm serious," Thomas replied. "Look, I could take anyone, but I'm tired of people who see me as just a wallet." "You're real, Olivia. You say what's on your mind, and you don't sugarcoat anything. That's rare in my world." Olivia stared at him, waiting for the punchline, but he seemed sincere. "So, what? You want me to play your fake date?" "Yes. I'll make it worth your while," Thomas said, his tone calm but serious. "I'll pay for everything, your outfit, hair, and whatever else you need. And as a thank you, I'll give you a job at one of my companies. It'll be enough to get you off the streets for good." Olivia blinked in surprise. "Why me? I'm not exactly party material, you know." Thomas leaned closer. "Because most women I know would say yes for the wrong reasons. I don't want that. And honestly, I don't think anyone can pull this off better than you." She looked at him skeptically. "And what do I have to do? Be on your arm and smile at people who think I'm one of you?" "Exactly." Olivia hesitated, weighing her options. The thought of pretending to belong in a room full of millionaires made her stomach twist. But the offer of a job, a stable life, was too tempting to ignore. "Fine," she said finally. "I'll do it, but on one condition." "Name it." "There's nothing between us. This is business, Thomas. Nothing more." Thomas smiled faintly. "Agreed." A few days later, Thomas took Olivia to a high-end boutique in the heart of the city. The sales staff eyed her skeptically at first. Her worn clothes and scuffed shoes didn't exactly match their usual clientele, but one stern glance from Thomas shut them up. "This is ridiculous," Olivia whispered as she stepped out of the changing room in a stunning black evening gown. Thomas turned, his breath catching for a moment. She looked elegant, the sleek dress accentuating her natural beauty. "Ridiculous, or perfect?" he asked with a smirk. "Feels like I'm wearing someone else's life," Olivia said, smoothing the fabric awkwardly. "Maybe it's time you start living a different life," Thomas replied softly. Later, they visited a salon, where Olivia's tangled curls were tamed into a polished style, and light makeup brought out her striking features. By the end of the day, even she barely recognized herself in the mirror. When Thomas dropped her off at a small hotel he had arranged for her, Olivia paused before getting out of the car. "Why are you doing this, Thomas?" she asked quietly. He hesitated for a moment, meeting her gaze. "Maybe I just want to feel like a decent person again." The night of the party arrived, and as Thomas and Olivia stepped into the grand ballroom, heads turned. Olivia felt out of place despite her glamorous attire, but Thomas gave her a reassuring smile and guided her confidently through the crowd. People whispered as they passed, intrigued by the mystery woman on Thomas's arm. A few even approached to compliment Olivia, impressed by her poise and beauty. Everyone staring, Olivia whispered, gripping Thomas's arm. "They're just jealous," he replied with a grin. "You look stunning." As the night went on, Olivia's nerves began to ease. She discovered she could hold her own in conversations with people far more privileged than she was. By the end of the evening, she felt almost confident. When they finally left the party, Thomas looked at her with genuine gratitude. "You did great tonight," he said as they walked to his car. "So, what now?" Olivia asked, her voice lighter than usual. "Now, we make good on our deal," Thomas said, handing her a sealed envelope. "Inside, you'll find details for the job I promised. The position is yours if you want it." Olivia hesitated before taking the envelope. "Thanks, Thomas. For everything." As they drove through the city, a hint of something unspoken hung in the air between them, a connection that neither of them could fully understand but couldn't deny either. Thomas's mind was a whirlwind as he paced the length of his office. The call with his father earlier that morning replayed in his head like a broken record. "Thomas, the board is expecting me to announce you as CEO by Friday. But this family has certain standards. I need you to show me you found stability, a partner who'll stand by you. Without that, I'm not convinced you're ready." His father's voice had been firm, leaving no room for debate. "Don't let me down, son." Thomas ran a hand through his hair, his chest tightening at the ultimatum. It wasn't just about the company, it was about proving himself to his father, who had always pushed him to be better, stronger, and smarter than anyone else. The problem was, Thomas didn't have a girlfriend. Since Isabella's departure, he had avoided relationships altogether, unwilling to risk being hurt again. Now, with the deadline looming, he found himself turning to the only person who'd seen him beyond the billionaire facade, Olivia. Olivia stood at her small apartment's tiny kitchen counter, carefully folding laundry, when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, surprised to see Thomas's name. They hadn't spoken much since the bow party, though she'd received an offer letter from his company and had started working as a junior designer in one of his subsidiaries. Curious, she picked up. "Hello. Olivia, it's Thomas." His voice was steady, but there was an unfamiliar hesitancy in his tone. "Hey," she replied, leaning against the counter. "What's up?" "I need your help." "Again." Olivia chuckled dryly. "Help with what? Another party?" "Not quite," Thomas said, his voice tinged with awkwardness. "My father expects me to introduce someone special during an important company event. It's more than just a meet and greet, it's tied to me becoming CEO. And right now, I don't exactly have anyone to introduce." Olivia furrowed her brow. "Are you asking me to pretend to be your girlfriend again?" Thomas exhaled, relieved she'd caught on so quickly. "Yes. But this time, it's bigger. There'll be board members, shareholders, my parents. I need them to believe we're serious." Olivia's silence was deafening. She thought of the last time she'd stood at his side, pretending to belong in his world. It had been exhausting and humiliating at times, but it had also changed her life. Did she really want to go through it again? "Thomas, why me?" "You could ask anyone, someone who actually fits your image." "Because I trust you," Thomas admitted. "You're honest, Olivia, even when it's hard. And I feel like I can count on you." His words caught her off guard. Trust wasn't something she was used to being given. Sighing, she replied, "All right, I'll do it. But you owe me for this." "Anything you want," Thomas promised. The following evening, Thomas picked up Olivia from her apartment. As she stepped into the car, dressed in an understated but elegant navy blue dress, Thomas couldn't hide his admiration. "You look stunning," he said, his voice soft. "Thanks," Olivia muttered, adjusting the thin strap of her dress. "Let's just get this over with." When they arrived at the venue, a grand ballroom glittering with chandeliers and filled with high-profile guests, Olivia felt a pang of anxiety. Unlike the previous party, this was more personal. These were Thomas's parents, his closest colleagues, and people who would scrutinize her every move. As they walked in hand, Thomas whispered, "Relax. You've got this." His father, a tall man with an air of authority, greeted them near the entrance. Beside him stood Thomas's mother, who wore an icy expression that seemed to freeze Olivia on the spot. "Dad, Mom, this is Olivia," Thomas introduced, his tone warm and confident. Olivia extended her hand, trying to appear composed. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. and Mrs. Carter." "Likewise," his father said, shaking her hand with a polite smile. Thomas's mother, however, merely glanced at her, her expression unreadable. "How did you two meet?" she asked, her voice cool. Thomas jumped in smoothly. "It was unexpected, but isn't that how the best things always happen?" For the rest of the evening, Olivia played her part perfectly, fielding polite but probing questions from Thomas's parents and the other guests. To her surprise, she and Thomas's father hit it off. He seemed genuinely interested in her, asking about her aspirations and listening attentively as she spoke about her job and past struggles. Meanwhile, Thomas's mother watched silently from the sidelines, her sharp gaze lingering on Olivia. The evening was going well, until it wasn't. As Thomas prepared to give his closing remarks, a familiar voice pierced the room. "Stop. Before you lie to everyone here, they should know the truth." All heads turned as Isabella, Thomas's ex-girlfriend, stormed into the room. Dressed in a fiery red dress, she marched up to the podium where Thomas stood frozen. "That girl," Isabella announced, pointing at Olivia, "isn't his girlfriend. She's homeless, a charity case he hired to play pretend." Gasps and murmurs spread through the crowd. Olivia's face burned as the words hit her like a slap. "Isabella, enough," Thomas said, his voice sharp as he stepped forward. But the damage was done. Olivia couldn't bear the stares and whispers. She turned and ran from the room, her heart pounding. Outside, Olivia struggled to catch her breath. She felt humiliated, exposed, and foolish for ever agreeing to this. "Olivia!" Thomas's voice called from behind her. She spun around, tears streaming down her face. "I told you this would happen. I never belonged in your world, Thomas, and I never will." "That's not true," Thomas argued, stepping closer. "I don't care what Isabella said, she doesn't know you." "That's the problem," Olivia shouted. "No one in that room knows me. To them, I'm nothing but a fake. A fraud." Thomas reached out, his voice softening. "You're not a fraud. You're the most real person I've ever met." Olivia shook her head, stepping back. "I can't do this anymore, Thomas. I'm done pretending." Before he could respond, she hailed a cab and disappeared into the night, leaving Thomas standing on the sidewalk, alone and defeated. The next morning, Thomas tried calling Olivia, but she didn't pick up. Determined, he drove to her apartment and knocked on the door. When she finally answered, her eyes were red from crying. "What do you want, Thomas?" she asked tiredly. "To apologize," he said earnestly. "I'm sorry for dragging you into this and for letting you get hurt." Olivia looked at him, her expression softening slightly. "Why did you do it, Thomas? Why me?" He hesitated, then said quietly, "Because I care about you. More than I realized." Olivia's eyes widened, surprise flickering across her face. "I was afraid to admit it before," Thomas continued, "but last night made me realize something. I don't want to pretend anymore, Olivia. I want something real, with you." Tears welled up in Olivia's eyes. "Thomas. I don't know if I can trust this." "You don't have to decide now," Thomas said gently. "But I'm not giving up on us." A week later, Thomas's father invited them both to dinner. To Olivia's surprise, his father welcomed her warmly, and even his mother seemed less frosty than before. After dessert, Thomas pulled Olivia aside and took her hand. "I know it's been a lot, and I've made mistakes. But I want you to know this: when I look at you, I don't see where you came from or what you've been through. I just see someone amazing. Someone I want in my life forever." Before Olivia could respond, Thomas knelt on one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. "Olivia, will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her cheeks as she nodded, a smile breaking through. "Yes." As applause erupted from the nearby dining room, Thomas pulled her into a tight embrace, whispering, "Thank you for taking a chance on me." The lesson: life's greatest treasures often lie where we least expect them. Sometimes, we must take risks, be vulnerable, and believe in second chances to find love, belonging, and true happiness.